Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted you've joined me for a story tonight, and this is a remarkable story that you're really going to enjoy. So let's get started, shall we? Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, my head is a foggy blur. It's throbbing violently. I feel as if I'm heavily drugged, with a sedative, or maybe locked under some kind of powerful anaesthetic perhaps, trying so desperately to come around from an operation or surgical procedure of some kind. But surely if I had had surgery, I would know about it. Not necessarily, comes a still voice in my head that is quick to answer my enigmatic question, leaving my mind clouded with yet more uncertainty. Where am I? What has happened to me? Are the two prominent questions ringing in my head like a loud, clamorous bell? I am rather familiar with this weird sensation because I've experienced it before, when I went under the surgeon's knife for a wrist operation 5 years prior. I vividly remember trying to awaken from the surgery, but I could not. I had a mighty struggle on my hands. I suspected the anaesthetist had given me way too much anaesthetic. It had knocked me out good and hard, almost as if the sedative I'd been given would have put a rhino out cold. I was only 110 pounds. I wondered, had the same thing happened to me all over again? Had I been given a walloping amount of anaesthetic that was weighing me down like heavy weights standing on a collection of books, pressing down a couple of wild flowers, crushed between the crisp white pages? I was like that tiny pressed flower, I suspected, unable to escape from my confinement. My mother informed me that following the surgery I'd undergone for my wrist procedure 5 years prior, that I had been delirious, disorientated, and very confused, as if I was disconnected to my reality, rather like an electric gadget not plugged into the mains. Apparently I'd been talking about how much I wanted to own a zebra, but I wasn't sure the African authorities would enable me to bring one through customs back to America. "Better than horses," I had said. "They've got nice black stripes." Apparently I went on and on about smuggling the zebra through customs from Africa, that apparently I wanted to own, and I've never ever been remotely partial to even riding horses, nor have I expressed any real interest in zebras before. So why would I ever want to own a zebra? That was beyond me. Was there another side of my personality that made itself known when I was out for the count? It would seem so. My mother told me that I was going to call the zebra Sharpie, like those Sharpie pens you get. I was talking incessantly about how to acquire the zebra. My mother had taken my hand in hers and given it an encouraging squeeze, while I lay there in my comatose state, fast asleep in the hospital bed, harpooned in my own little fanciful world, far away from our current reality. I began mumbling away about this zebra that I seemed determined to acquire. "Don't worry, Sharpie is on his way to you, love. He'll be here in America shortly. He's a fine-looking zebra, and the authorities have agreed to let him come through customs for you all the way from the continent of Africa. He's all yours," my mother said. "So just relax, will you?" When I came around from the surgery, as a joke, my mother, with her quirky sense of humour, could not resist buying me a stuffed zebra that I called Sharpie, who now stands pride of place on the mantel, an ever reminder to me to never go under the knife again, if I can possibly help it. For some reason it would appear that the cocktail of anaesthetics I was given did not appear to agree with my constitution, unless of course my anaesthetist, Dr. Dixon, had assumed I weighed 500 pounds instead of 110. My mother claimed to have overheard a couple of nurses whispering among themselves in the corridors after my surgery, and what she heard them say turned her blood cold. "I think Dr. Dixon gave her way too much anaesthetic, don't you? I could smell booze on his breath. That girl should have come around from the surgery, should she not? Unless she had some kind of adverse reaction to the sedatives. I'm worried because I think Dr. Dixon might have mistakenly given her enough anaesthetic to put out an ox," the other nurse had whispered. "Do you think she's going to be all right? She's a small little thing, is she not?" "She'll be fine," said the nurse, "but I need to have words with Dr. Dixon about this. This can't happen again." "Maybe it's not Dr. Dixon's fault," came the earnest reply. "We can't possibly point fingers at the man. We don't know what happened, and that would not be fair. He is a great anaesthetist. Maybe the girl's the problem, the patient, I mean. We're all different to how we react to things, don't you think? Maybe Dr. Dixon gave her the right amount of sedatives. He's an excellent anaesthetist. I know he is. Great reputation he has. Everybody knows that." "I suppose you're right," came the stiff reply. "But I'm still going to keep my eyes pinned on the man. I'm convinced it was alcohol on his breath, you know. But then again, it could have been mouthwash. They do say that some mouthwashes are very alcoholic. And let's not kid. Dr. Dixon's teeth are so white. I wouldn't be surprised if he gargled in bleach." "Well, that is true. Some mouthwashes do smell alcoholic. You're probably right. The girl just had a bad reaction to the anaesthetic. I mean, let's not kid. Dr. Dixon is highly professional and highly regarded. The poor girl is just struggling to come round, that's all. And all this talk about owning a zebra. It's absolutely hilarious." My mother was mortified when she overheard this conversation and was pondering what to do about some random comments made by a couple of nurses that left her feeling rather disquieted. But when she returned to the hospital ward, to her relief, I was sitting up in my hospital bed, looking as if I was heavily drugged, but nevertheless aware of my surroundings, so I had returned to the land of the living. My mother soon forgot her worries. When I came around from my surgery, and was as right as rain again, I did remain rather dopey for the next 24 hours, where I continued talking a whole bunch of nonsense. Whether I had experienced a bad reaction to the anaesthetic, or whether I had been given too much anaesthesia, I may never know the answer to that question. One thing was for sure, I never wanted to be put out like that again, to become so powerless and at the mercy of the surgeon. I knew when I got older in the future, I would run away from all cosmetic surgery. I know that celebrities run after it, because they see it as the elixir of youth. But not me. No, thank you very much. Never me. When push comes to shove, I would rather age gracefully than put my reliance on a cosmetic procedure to wipe away the years that may subject me to unnecessary risk that I just would not want to take. Right now, I'm fully aware that something has happened to me. But what? That is the burning question that is hovering up in the sky of my mind like an eagle in full flight. The familiar experience is unpleasant. It's like Groundhog Day being repeated all over again, as if I'd been put under the knife again for a second wrist procedure. But I know that makes no sense at all. My aching head feels as thick as syrup. I do not recall having been taken into surgery, unless, of course, I was involved in a fortuitous accident of some kind. That must be it. I've definitely been in an accident of some sort. It would be the only thing to explain this weird foggy sensation that is keeping me suspended tightly in this blurred parallel universe that I can't seem to escape. It is so claustrophobic, cruelly hemming me in from every side. I feel like an insect entangled in a spider's web, and the more I struggle to break free from the silken fibres of those threads, the more ensnared I become. All I want to do is to scream as loud as I possibly can, so that someone can help me overcome the shackles of my internal prison that I am subjugated to. I might as well be locked up in a padded prison cell. That is how hopelessly alone I feel. I just can't seem to get anybody's attention, no matter how hard I try. I even try to flicker my eyelashes, to twitch my nose, but nothing moves, not even a finger, not even my feet. It's as if I'm completely trapped in my own body. My throat is dry and scratchy, and even when I want to say something, nothing comes out of my mouth, other than a faint, rather annoying mumble, that I'm sure is barely coherent. If there are any nurses around at the minute, would they even hear my strangled gasps or my feeble attempts at communication? I don't think so. My body is stubbornly refusing to cooperate with my mind, as if it's playing truant. I must be in a coma. That's it. Either that or I'm definitely dead, for I'm trapped in a dark, empty void. I can sense my surroundings, though, but it's a thick, clawing, insufferable heaviness that is pulling me right under, like the waves of the ocean, dragging me beneath them, as I struggle with all my might and all my strength to get to the surface again, so that I can breathe that life-giving oxygen. The feeling is like that, holding me down with such a brute force. I feel absolutely convinced I've got to be in a hospital. There can be no other explanation. Was I in a car crash or something, I wonder? I had experienced a few near misses before, on the roads here in Seattle's commuter traffic, when you always get the one outrageously impertinent driver on the road that is willing to take perilous risks, as if that little bit of extra speed will ensure they get to their required destination a tiny bit faster. Never mind, they might end up not getting home at all, if they drive recklessly enough. But some people don't think about long-term consequences of their impatience, do they? And I've never been able to comprehend why. Me personally, I'd like to arrive at my destination alive, thank you very much. If I did happen to have a car accident, then I have no memory of such an inauspicious event. But that would be normal, wouldn't it, to lose your memory like this, as victims of road accidents barely remember the experience at all, as if their memory has been purposely wiped out and blanked. Maybe it's the body's internal protective mechanism that comes into play here, that enables us to heal faster, so we don't end up with post-traumatic stress disorder. For indeed, if we remembered all the gruesome, horrific details of an accident, maybe we'd be far too afraid to get behind the wheel of our car again, to get back on our dirt bike, onto the surfing board, or a horse perhaps. In my case, I have no recollection whatsoever of the last 24 hours of my life, whether I took a drive in my white Hyundai or not. I try to consider this in my seemingly drug-induced state. If I'd gone out in the car on a weeknight, it would have been likely for me to pick up some groceries from the late-night 24-hour store, as I'm always needing to buy a light snack for my evening meal, as I'm not always keen to cook when I return home after a day's work. That could be a distinct possibility, but my memory eludes me, like a balloon on the wind, that I simply cannot grasp, no matter how hard I try. I know who I am. Thank goodness for that. I haven't forgotten such vital information. My name is June Amelia Jones. Yes, that's right. My name is definitely June. I live in a beautiful Seattle apartment. It overlooks the Space Needle. It was a dream of mine to live in a luxurious apartment like this. Recently I got a promotion at work to the illustrious position of office manager, which might not sound very impressive, but it actually is a promotional leap for me. I work at a company called Centerfile. My office is a stone's throw away from where I live. I'm in charge of quite a large team of dynamic people with ingenious ideas that make the business very successful. I do enjoy the responsibilities and challenges that my job presents. My parents' names are Mr. and Mrs. Jones. They both live in Spokane, Washington, where I grew up as a little girl. I feel relieved that I do remember these intrinsic details of my life, which is a promising start. But what happened over the last 24 hours, I cannot for the life of me figure out, and it makes me feel terribly on edge. Why is it that I seem incapable of breaking through to our reality? I feel as good as dead right now, and the thought of this makes me feel very unhinged. Supposing I am dead, but then I become so aware of my breathing. No, I'm not dead, and knowing that brings me a small measure of comfort. But why can I not wake up? It's like I'm on the edge of a stream and have to jump over the stones to get to the other side. But I keep slipping, falling, losing my balance, so that reaching the other side seems impossible. The last time I had surgery, as I was saying, was over 5 years ago, when I broke my wrist after I fell backwards on some unsuspecting black ice on the pavement. I landed directly on my wrist with all my body weight, in an ungainly fall, on a street populated with many pedestrians. I was going to pick up some doughnuts for my work colleagues for our tea break, and I had no idea that there were icy patches on the pavement. It had been freezing, ice-cold weather in Seattle. Everybody had been complaining about it, and there had been a huge increase of road traffic accidents due to what can only be described as invisible black ice on the roads, which is so treacherous, especially when you don't see it coming. I do recall my wrist was dangling off my hand so precariously. It looked gruesome, as if I was the owner of a gnarled claw. I remember a group of pedestrians rushing towards me to help me. One woman stared at me in abject horror. I thought she was going to faint at the very sight of my arm. She was saying in a raspy, disjointed voice, "My God! Look at her hand! Look at her hand!" "What happened?" people were asking me. One woman said, "She fell right over. I saw her just stumble backwards." One man resolved the problem. "There's a whole lot of black ice around here. Everyone, you must watch your footing. We need to get some salt down here before someone else falls over. Never seen it like this before, on the pavement of all things. So much black ice, it's all over the place. This is a hell of a dangerous." These kind, very generous people helped me up to my feet, and one of my office colleagues came to my rescue, assuring the well-meaning pedestrians that I was now in her charge. She would deal with my immediate needs and take me straight to the hospital. Needless to say, my hand was a hideous sight, that even the doctor shuddered in horror when he saw what I'd done to myself. But he assured me very politely he'd seen a lot worse. I'm sure it's true. I do suspect medical personnel have seen some horrendous sights in the hospital over the years, things you cannot unsee, and many of those emergencies would likely make my broken wrist seem very benign and insignificant. I recall the excruciating pain I experienced following my fall on the ice. It shot through me like a series of shooting stars, but in this case there was no beauty or awesome wonder involved. I was taken to the A&E in the UW Medical Center Montlake in Pacific Street, where under a mild anesthetic, the doctor on duty and a couple of nurses at his side slipped my wrist back into place as best as they could, so that at least my hand looked halfway decent. It would seem a day or so later, I went into surgery, where Dr. Russell Mendoza, my orthopedic surgeon, put a metal rod in my wrist, which I still have today, although I was told it might be a good idea to remove it once my wrist was fully healed. But I never went back to undergo another surgery again. I have an impassioned hatred for all things medical, and after the anaesthetist, Dr. Dixon, had put me out, I knew I never wanted to have an anesthetic again. I recall feeling as if I'd never wake up, like a desperate seal trapped under the ice, searching for that life-giving air hole, and wondering if he was ever going to find it. Right now, I have this profound, instinctive sense that I've got to be in a hospital bed. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. It's the only thing that explains my banging headache, the feeling of being plunged beneath huge volumes of sedative. Beyond that, another telltale sign is that my body is in absolute agony. I'm aching all over, as if I'd been pushed through a liquidizer, like the bananas in a smoothie. Everything is aching. Everything is hurting. I half expect a nurse to be standing over my bed, putting a gentle hand on me to reassure me, to tell me that I'm in hospital recovering from major surgery, as my spleen got ruptured in a car accident, or something like that, and that I'm doing very well and will make a speedy recovery. I want to hear those words more than anything else in the world, so that I can find my bearings in this labyrinth of confusion in which I find myself regretfully immersed. I try to discern whether I can wiggle my toes and fingers, and inwardly sigh with relief to realize they are still there, even if I don't seem to be able to move them. At least I'm in one piece, with all my appendages appearing to be together, so I'm not going to be informed that I'm missing a leg or something when I finally come around from this paradoxical delirium. I'm trying to see if I can remember what has happened to me, And I'm so frustrated because I just can't. Why can't I remember anything? My memory is stubbornly uncooperative. It's doggedly refusing to give me any insight as to my current whereabouts or what actually happened to me to bring me here in the first place. It is almost as if the last few hours of my life have been expunged and wiped away, like the raindrops on a windscreen window, to be remembered no more. I fight to come around from my comatose state, as if I'm wrestling a formidable opponent in a boxing ring, with very little success. Maybe I had a nasty fall, sustained a blow to my head. But if that is the case, why can't I remember anything? Why can I not remember a thing? If I'm in hospital, why can't I smell antiseptic smells that you equate with hospitals? Why can I not hear the scuttle of nurses' feet, the background chatter of people, or even the comforting sounds of my mother's voice telling me that I'm in good hands and I'm going to be just fine? I hear none of that. I am so overwhelmed with frustration, being caught in the heavy oblivion that blankets me from the world I know so well, like an office partition that is made of a thick clawing white mist that separates me from my current reality. Why can't I break through it all? Open your eyes, June, I keep telling myself over and over again. Then you will know exactly where you are. Then you will have the answers to the questions you're looking for. Go on, wake up, June. For goodness sake, wake up. A little voice in my head urges me to do just that. The voice is earnest and demanding. I try to obey it, I really do. But my drooping eyelids are so incredibly heavy, so stiff, so unyielding, almost as if they're made of a hardened cement. Finally, after much struggle, my eyes break open, like a fly ingeniously escaping the tiny hole in a trap. But when I open my eyes and sit up with a start, I realize to my horror that I'm not in a hospital bed. But where am I? 4 months earlier, I was incredibly happy to have moved into my Seattle apartment, overlooking the Space Needle. In the beginning, I didn't think I'd be able to afford to rent such a prime piece of real estate, although I had dreamed about this luxury often enough and talked about it with my mother on many occasions. My mother was one of the most positive people you could ever hope to meet, the kind of person who believed nothing was impossible if you put your mind to it. It was hardly a wonder that by profession she was a wellness coach and a trauma counsellor, helping people to fix up the mess of their broken lives. People who were addicted to food that they had no motivation to make any positive changes to their diet and lifestyle, and if they didn't do so fast, they might end up becoming a slave to their obesity, where food dictated the course of their lives. Others who were too afraid to leave their own homes because of a crippling, paralyzing, irrational fear that meant the walls of their own home had inadvertently become a prison to them. My mother had seen it all, worked with all kinds of colourful people from all walks of life, helping them to overcome and deal with their own personal demons, so that the mental shackles that had held them back for so long would have been loosed. She would always say, "I cannot help these people if they don't help themselves first." In my mother's office, she had hundreds of letters from people who said that she had changed their lives. "Mrs. Jones," the letters would say, "I don't know how to thank you. You set me free from my alcohol addiction. Thanks to you, I'm living my true authentic life, and I've been sober for many years now. I give you credit for my accomplishments, for without your intervention, I could be lying in a ditch somewhere, half cut, or worse still, dead. Thank you for giving me my life back." My mother would say, "True happiness has got nothing to do with what you materially own, believe it or not, or how well off you are financially. Many people believe that. Of course it helps. It helps a great deal. But happiness is a peaceful mindset, and once you've accomplished that, you will be very content with your life." As my mother's daughter, her words of encouragement were so convincing that I believed them myself. My mother was so positive that if she told me I was living in the 6th century AD, I'd have probably believed her. So when she informed me one day that I would definitely own my dream apartment overlooking the Space Needle, I didn't doubt it for a second. My mother had been proved right about so many things over the course of her life, and her positivity was always infectious. I knew that an opportunity to own a luxurious apartment like that would not present itself unless I received a promotion at work, and I didn't see that coming my way in a hurry. But once again my mother persuaded me that a promotion for me was around the very next corner. I just had to believe in that possibility, and then it would happen. "Sweetheart," my mother would say, "you can get that dream apartment of yours overlooking the Space Needle. It's not impossible. But you do need to get that promotion at work first. And the problem is you have to believe in yourself. If you doubt yourself, then I can guarantee you it will not happen for you. You always get what you expect in life, not necessarily what you want or deserve." "But how can I get a promotion?" I said in a cantankerous grumble. "Chance would be a fine thing. Mr. Bridges barely notices me. He never gives me a second glance. You have no idea what Mr. Bridges is like, Mum. No idea at all. He watches over us like a shark over a school of sardines. The mind boggles as to how many people he's sacked in recent years. He's ruthless, Mum. You put one foot wrong, I promise you, and you'll be out on a limb. Sometimes I feel as if I'm walking on eggshells at work, waiting to be called in to Mr. Bridges' office, to be given my calling cards. And then it's over cadovers for me," I said miserably. My mother reflected over my words rather soberly. "Surely he's not that bad, love. Aren't you being a bit dramatic? I'm quite sure your biggest problem is your perception of the man. I'll have you know that perception can be a very poor barometer of the truth. It can be hazardously misleading. You need to try and see things at your workplace through Mr. Bridges' eyes, so you can comprehend why he reacts in the way he does towards some of the staff in his employ. You must remember it is in his interest to have people working for him, delivering their very best on the job. I mean, think about it. When you had your wrist surgery, you wouldn't have wanted someone incompetent fixing you up, would you? High standards are incredibly important in the workplace, and inefficient employees might make Mr. Bridges himself look incompetent. Have you thought about that?" "I get what you're saying, Mum, and yes, it does make loads of sense. But I still emphatically believe that I will never understand Mr. Bridges. How can I understand a man like that? He's unreasonable, that's all I can say. Over the years, he's let go of some really great people, as far as I'm concerned, for no good reason at all. We're human beings, Mum. We make mistakes. But no, Mr. Bridges expects us to behave like robots, to do everything perfectly." "Sometimes, love, people cannot afford to make mistakes. For example, there are honey seekers in the Himalayas, going after a honey that actually makes people hallucinate. It's a very powerful elixir, and it's a honey that is sold all over the world in places like Japan, where they find it for medicinal uses. But these honey hunters have to go up these tiny rope ladders to great heights on these huge cliff faces to find that wild honey. And if they lose their footing on these tiny little rope ladders that swing all over the place, then they will fall to their deaths. So they cannot afford to make a mistake. And do you know what, love? They know that they won't. They have that much faith in themselves. Let me tell you something for nothing. No one sacks a person for no good reason. Surely you must have a good idea as to why Mr. Bridges has let go of these people. I don't think it's as black and white as you seem to assume." I thought about my mother's words long and hard. "Well, I think he lets people go for poor timekeeping, sloppy work, that kind of thing. Actually, the sloppy work is a biggie with him. He can't stand that. It's his pet peeve. He's got zero tolerance for that." "Go on, said my mother. "Give me an example, so I can get a better understanding of Mr. Bridges." I shrugged my shoulders nonchalantly. "Well, I do remember there was a girl working at the offices called Liz. I forget what her surname was. She was with us so fleetingly, and then she was gone. She wrote up a report for him, with hundreds of spelling mistakes and poor grammar. It was so bad that Mr. Bridges came into the office and threw the report at poor Liz. It fell onto the floor with a loud thump, missing her by mere inches. Everyone in the office practically jumped out of their skin. They were startled. I've never seen Mr. Bridges look so angry. It was like his thin body was jiggling with indignation. His face was as red as a field of poppies. "What do you call this, Liz?" he bellowed. "I can't believe you present such shoddy work to me. This is completely unacceptable and inexcusable. I'm appalled by your low standards of presentation. There is no excuse for this, with the computer technology we have accessible to us today. You would think at the very least you would have done a spell check, but no, you were too lazy to do that. Those are basic requirements. If it's not bad enough, your grammar is atrocious, Liz. There is no excuse for these reprehensible mistakes. You should be ashamed of yourself. Do you have no pride in the quality of the work you produce? Get your things now and go. You're fired." "Mr. Bridges, I'm really sorry," Liz had said in a pleading voice. "I really need this job. I really need it. Please don't fire me. I'll do better next time, I promise. I've just had a few rough days, that's all." Mr. Bridges raised his hand.
"I don't want to hear your pitiful excuses. There will be no next time, I'm afraid, Liz. We all have rough days in our lives, but we have to rise above them, don't we? I don't give second chances to lazy people. Get your things and go."
Poor Liz just grabbed a box, packed her things inside it, walked away with her tail between her legs. Everyone felt desperately sorry for her, as you can imagine, but no one said anything, unless they ended up having their job axed as well. Mr. Bridges is ruthless, Mum. I'm telling you, ruthless.
"That is very interesting, June," said my mother reflectively, as she tried to figure out Mr. Bridges, as if she was a scientist, putting him under a glass slide and studying him under a microscope to give me her findings. "It sounds to me as if Mr. Bridges is a perfectionist. Nothing rubs him up the wrong way more than a report that lacks finesse and is badly put together. As for all the spelling mistakes and bad grammar that Liz made, that was the writing on the wall for the young lady." "Well, there you go," said my mother triumphantly, slapping her hands together with a finality that suggested she had all the answers for me. "When you're dealing with a perfectionist like Mr. Bridges, you need to make everything you present to the man be as perfect as possible. Then he will single you out for favour, and before you know it, you will get that promotion you've been longing for."
You make it sound so easy, Mum. It's not as straightforward as that. Mr. Bridges is impossible to please. There are loads of people working in those offices with me. I'm one among many. The man barely notices me. The only time I had any real personal contact with him was when I came to an interview with him at Centerfile. I was shaking in my boots because even back then I could sense he was a hard taskmaster with exacting, punctilious standards. In truth, I'm rather surprised I got the job at all. I don't think the man notices I exist, or anybody else for that matter, apart from a few favourites. As to why he employed me in the first place, God only knows. I hardly think he sees me as an asset to the team. You sound like the perennial pessimist, love. That's not going to get you very far. If you say Mr. Bridges doesn't notice you, because there are so many of you working for him, like a team of carpenter ants, that all look the same, then you need to stand out from the crowd so that he does notice you. Make sure you produce excellent quality work with no mistakes. There is no such word as impossible. I've told you that all your life, and you know it's true. What you don't get, Mum, is that some of the people that work at Centerfile, some of my work colleagues, are absolutely brilliant, very talented, and I'm sure they shine a lot brighter than I do.
A lot of them are cleverer than I am. If a promotion is ever in the pipeline, it'll be likely given to one of them, not me." My mother waved her elegant white hand in the air, in a swatting gesture, as if she was shooing away an annoying fly. "Honestly, love, listen to yourself. You do only half talk some nonsense. If you can continue talking like this, then you will not get that promotion. You need to change very quickly. That shoddy mindset of yours will do you no favours. You'll be in the same job you're doing now in 10 years' time, if that's the case. You need to get your act together, to sharpen up, love, and quit feeling sorry for yourself and adapting such a defeatist mentality. I didn't raise you to be a shrinking violet. Now, for God's sake, stand up for yourself and make sure you shine in that workplace like the brightest star in the heavens. Can you do that for me?" "I'll try my level best, Mum," I said begrudgingly, "but I can assure you it's not going to be easy." "Nothing you desire comes easily, love. That's the whole point." One day as I was sitting at my computer in the offices, Lee Brondell, one of my work colleagues, tapped me with an urgent gentleness on the shoulders. She looked a little disquieted. Her face was drained of all its colour. She looked apologetic when she said to me, in a low whisper, "Mr. Bridges wants to see you in his offices right now. He says it's important." I looked up at Lee from my computer, with eyes growing wider and wider, and more horrified by the second. My stomach twisted into knots. My heart began to punnel furiously against my ribcage like a bird that wanted to escape. If Mr. Bridges wanted to see me now, it was not good news. Everyone knew what that meant. I had done something so dreadful in his opinion that I needed to be thrown out with the dirty bathwater. One thing is for certain, Mr. Bridges had spat out his venom at me. I would lightly leave the offices at centre file, like a shadow of my former self, feeling the full indignity and disgrace of my humiliation. Everyone in the office gave me sympathetic but knowing looks. They knew as much as I did about my impending fate. It was almost written in stone for me. A few people wished me good luck. No doubt they thought I was about to be given the snip. Everything went very quiet in the offices. Lee Brondell grabbed me by the hand and gave it an encouraging squeeze. "I'm so sorry, June, so sorry," she whispered, her eyes dropping to the floor to avoid meeting my gaze. Lee Brondell really liked me, and I knew she would be sad if I was to be let go of. "Don't let Mr. Bridges eat you alive," she whispered. "Keep it together, June. Don't break down in tears in front of Mr. Bridges. That's if he gives you your calling cards. Whatever he has to say to you, take it in your stride with dignity. And even if you do have to leave centre file for good, make sure you walk away with your head held high. You've done nothing wrong, so don't you dare scurry away like a frightened mouse, like the last girl did. Mr. Bridges can be very domineering, but don't let that man get you down. Understand? You know your worth, girl, even if Mr. Bridges foolishly fails to see it." I nodded. "Thanks for the good advice. I'll do my best," I said in a squeaky voice that I wasn't sure was even my own. I drew in a deep breath to calm down my nerves. Why was I surprised? I knew in my gut this day would finally come, but at this precise moment it was all far too soon for me. With knees crumbling beneath me, I dragged my reluctant, uncooperative legs all the way to Mr. Bridges' office, as if conducting a long walk of shame, from death row prison to the executioner's chamber. I was trembling in my boots, terrified about what awaited me on the other side of the door. There was an ornate gold-embossed sign on the outside of the walnut door, which read Senior Director and CEO, Mr. Bridges. I gingerly knocked on the door, and I heard Mr. Bridges' booming voice telling me to come in. "Come in if that's you, Miss Jones. You are welcome to come in right now." I reluctantly pushed the door open, peering nervously around the corner, wishing with my whole heart that the ground would swallow me whole. But Mr. Bridges beckoned to me with a wave of his hand. I knew why I was here. Of course I did. I had failed exponentially to present the recent report to Mr. Bridges on time.
But it had been so much hard work, and my mother's advice had burned into me.
Don't present anything inferior or wishy-washy to the man. Make sure that everything you produce for him is absolutely meticulous. And if you do that, you won't go wrong.
I had wanted to get it exactly right. I didn't want to present anything to Mr. Bridges that was less than absolutely perfect, as I believed that my mother's evaluation of the man was absolutely spot on. So my report, that had been very fastidious, had taken longer than I had anticipated. I understood that Mr. Bridges had not been best pleased with the delay of my report. Beyond all that, I had unfortunately arrived late to work 4 times in the last week, when my alarm clock had failed to go off in time, which I had since replaced, for fear that my job at Centerfile would become all but a whisper on the wind. Now it looked like it was becoming just that. I was absolutely certain that Mr. Bridges would be fully aware of my poor timekeeping. I knew he checked up on all of us, and the times we arrived at work. Late timekeeping was another one of his pet peeves. He would say there was no excuse for it. I suspected that this was the reason that Mr. Bridges was about to give me the sack today. Why did he have to be so doggedly unreasonable? Was there really no humanity in the man? I would be too proud to beg him to give me another chance, as Liz had done. Mr. Bridges had no mercy. I had been working at Centerfile for 5 years now, and made some jolly good friends on the job. But there wasn't anyone at work that was not intimidated by Mr. Bridges, as he wasn't known as the Bloodhound for nothing. Mr. Bridges ran a tight ship, and you were literally thrown overboard if you didn't deliver on the job. Everybody knew that. The punctilious man had zero tolerance towards any listless, work-shy people who had an inclination for slothful laziness or were shiftlessly sluggish about getting anything done in time. Since I'd started working at Centerfile, I had been giving my all, but maybe that wasn't enough. My late report that I'd handed in a day later might have just been the beginning of the end for me. Perhaps Mr. Bridges had decided that enough was enough. Was I surprised? Absolutely not. I think I had foreseen this happening, even though I'd tried to take my mother's salient advice to heart, and to shine like a pearl among all the employees at Centerfile. But by the looks of things, I had failed to get noticed by Mr. Bridges. Maybe I had got noticed, but not in the good way that I'd hoped. Mr. Bridges looked rather like a high school nerd, with thick black framed glasses that made his reflectant eyes appear absolutely huge. He was rail thin, reasonably tall, well over 6 foot, but he was one of the most formidable people that I'd ever had the pleasure to meet. He was ruthlessly unforgiving towards anyone who slacked on the job. He was always immaculately turned out, in pristine tailor-made suits, and he would wear a selection of very colourful ties that were an antithesis to his rather dull, dreary personality. Well, that's what I thought at the time. My heart was fluttering wildly in my chest like a frightened pigeon as he beckoned for me to take a seat on what appeared to be a grandiose-looking British racing green leather swivel chair. I had never been into Mr. Bridges's offices before. Well, that's not exactly true. I had been interviewed for a job here at Centerfile in his office, but since that rather nerve-wracking ordeal, I had failed to remember how opulent his office was, which only served to accentuate to me the obvious importance of this man. The masterfully engineered futuristic tower block I worked in was a huge modern development, with cutting-edge innovative designs that had possibly cost millions of dollars to procure. Mr. Bridges' contemporary office boasted floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a busy street. His office was on the 75th floor, so the view was panoramic to say the very least, and the pedestrians walking along the street below looked like tiny little ants. Mr. Bridges must have loved the colour green, and an interior designer had cast her resplendent magic wand all over the place to make everything coordinate superbly. The green walls were covered with all his credentials, which alone were intimidating. Mr. Bridges may have looked like the quintessential school nerd. He'd have likely been bullied for wearing those thick-bottled glasses and being as skinny as a string bean. But he had more degrees behind him than some people have enjoyed hot dinners, and that in itself was unnerving. All I could think about was what it would ultimately mean for me if I lost my job. The idea was giving me hot flushes, as if I'd slipped into the menopause at 30 years of age. I could feel my cheeks burning. The thought of losing my job was too dreadful to contemplate. It would mean I'd have to go back to live with my parents in Spokane and find a local job working at Amy's with all the donuts there. That really would be a fall from grace. But Mr. Bridges would be unlikely to give me a good reference. It was competitive out there in the professional marketplace, and you were only as good as your last reference. Mr. Bridges eyed me through his thick-rimmed dark glasses, that, as I was saying, made his eyes appear enormously big, which for me was even more daunting. He said to me, "Do you know why I requested to see you, Miss Jones?" My heart was doing pirouettes in my chest. I was twisting my clammy fingers together nervously, in order to calm myself down. But I looked up at Mr. Bridges to meet his steely gaze. If Mr. Bridges was going to give me the sack today, at the very least I would walk away with dignity. I would even leave with saying something like, "I'm sorry you feel disappointed in me, Mr. Bridges, but you have lost a valuable member of your staff, and I think you will regret having fired me." He could put that in his pipe and smoke it. See how he liked that. I would be the one to have the last word, not like the other people that had looked so sheepish and bashful as they crawled away from the officers, wearing shame all over their faces, as if they believed they had deserved the sack. That would not be me. Yes, it would be gut-wrenching and soul-destroying, having to put all the stuff that's in my desk into a cardboard box, and just saying goodbye to all my friends, while taking the walk of shame down the corridors, down the lift, through the offices. But then again I would hold my head up high, no matter what. "The report, Mr. Bridges. Is that why you wanted to see me?" I asked lamely.
"How did you know, Miss Jones, that I wanted to see you about your report? You are right about that. It seems you are as sharp as you are perceptive and discerning. I was incredibly impressed with the presentation of your report. It was professional, methodical, and meticulous, just the way I like it. I was taken aback by your high standards, Miss Jones," he said, raising a bushy brow that seriously needed a good trim. I almost wished I could lean over the desk and snip away the stray hairs from his eyebrows, but I resisted the temptation. "To be brutally honest with you, Miss Jones, I had very low expectations when you came into my employ. I did not expect such eloquence from you. When you first arrived here to work at Centerfile, I thought you would be one of those ditzy people, likely to disappoint me. But for once I'm glad to say I was proved wrong. It goes to show never judge a book by its cover," he said with an amused laugh. "I've actually read some dog-eared books in my time, you know, that were masterpieces, and I wouldn't have believed that for a single moment."
"What do you mean?" I asked churlishly, feeling slightly offended that anyone would look at me like a dog-eared book. I always arrived at work looking professional, wearing black trousers, jackets and smart shirts. I always looked the part, but obviously Mr. Bridges did not think so. He was describing me in a less than complimentary way.
"Please don't take offence, Miss Jones. You're a small little wispy thing, are you not? I thought you would be a little flaky, that's all. Head in the clouds sort of thing. The kind of young lady too concerned over her makeup than focusing on the job at hand. I'm delighted to say that I have been proved wrong. Believe it or not, Miss Jones, whatever you may think of me, I do enjoy being proved wrong. It makes for a pleasant surprise, as normally I'm right on the money about everything, especially my assessment of people. But not with you, Miss Jones. Not with you. You are like that lovely surprise you never saw coming, which is very refreshing indeed. I would go so far as to say among my employees, you are the one that stands out to me. I know how a lot of the staff view me, Miss Jones. I'm very aware of that. They don't view me very kindly. Believe me, I know I'm ruthless, but I'm not as bad as people think. I still have a heart, you know, and a great sense of humour, even if I say so myself. But it is very important for me that people give of their best in their jobs, and when they don't, I can become very aggrieved for good reason. I'm sure you can appreciate that."
"You're saying I stand out to you, Mr. Bridges?" I said, looking at him aghast. I'd expected this rendezvous with him to go pear-shaped. The man was complimenting me. This was a first. I truly thought as if I was going to pass out from the shock of this unlikely conversation.
"You do stand out to me, Miss Jones, I'm very glad to say,"
said Mr. Bridges. He began fingering my report that I had presented to him in a purple file. A big smile grew on his face. I was surprised to see the man had a perfect set of pearly whites that were definitely all his own. I don't think I'd ever seen Mr. Bridges smile before. The smile lit up his entire face, and suddenly he didn't seem so intimidating anymore. I found myself returning his smile, and mine was so big that for days afterwards my zygomatic muscles still ached from the torture of that smile.
"Well done, Miss Jones. I am very impressed with you. Yes, your report may have been a day late, but this is quickly forgiven when I see the amount of work, effort and dedication you put into the report. I was in awe of your professionalism, and there was not one mistake in the entire report. Not one."
"No mistakes? No mistakes at all?" I asked, confounded.
"No mistakes at all, Miss Jones. You should be very proud of yourself on that one. You're a fine example, Miss Jones, of the standards of high delivery I expect in the workplace. You will be a great role model to the people under my charge."
All I could do was gape at Mr. Bridges, my mouth opening and closing like a startled goldfish, but I said nothing. Mr. Bridges slowly took off his glasses so that I could see his green eyes more clearly. I was surprised how attractive his eyes were, as the glasses he wore really did him no favours.
"Miss Jones, there is another reason I've called you into my offices today. It was not only because of your outstanding report, although that was one of the reasons, but I had another ulterior motive. I do not know if you are aware that Julia Napier is leaving Centerfile. She gave me her notice a month ago. She has been a huge asset to our company, with her prompt efficiency, her ingenious ideas, and outstanding presentation and delivery of all her reports. She was a remarkable office manager, reporting to me in person. I've called you in today, Miss Jones, as I would like to offer you her job. I believe you are the one in the office that has the ability to fill her big shoes. What do you say, Miss Jones?"
"You're giving me the office manager's job?" I asked in astoundment, unable to believe I was hearing right. In truth, I felt as if I was going to faint from the shock. This was the last thing I expected to hear.
"That is right, Miss Jones. It is very good news for you, because you will be reporting directly to me. And I need not remind you that the pay you will receive will be substantial. It is to meet the demands of the job, because here at Centerfile, I believe emphatically in rewarding my staff by paying very well. What do you say, Miss Jones?"
"I'm lost for words, Mr. Bridges. I'm lost for words. I truly don't know what to say. I'm in shock. I didn't expect this."
Mr. Bridges gave me a warm smile. "Yes is an easier answer than any, Miss Jones."
"Yes, of course I'll accept the job, Mr. Bridges. Thank you so much."
"Don't thank me, Miss Jones. You have earned this job on your own merits. Congratulations. From tomorrow you will be reporting directly to me. And I need you to work with Mrs. Napier, so she can show you the ropes. Is that understood?"
"Yes, Mr. Bridges. Thank you, Mr. Bridges." So there we are. That's the end of part 1. Part 2 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.